All right, guys. So welcome to another episode of Awakening Lions. This next guest that I have is I'm super excited for. GS Youngblood is the author of Masculine in Relationship, which, by the way, is one of the few books I keep in my nightstand next to my bed, and I probably have like 4 years worth of notes in it from going back through it and referencing it, in multiple different points in my own personal life. GS also is the author of Art of Embodiment. He runs a few men's retreats, some boot camps, really all designed to help guide guys and give them the tools to really tap into their masculine core. And that's kind of some of the stuff that I want to talk about, with you today, GS. So, first of all, welcome to the program, man.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for having me on. I've been
Yeah,
looking forward to this, so let's do this.
yeah, absolutely. Because when we start talking, masculinity, it's such a hot topic and can be such a controversial topic because it's wildly misunderstood of what that framework looks like in the modern era compared to what it was traditionally viewed as, right? And that's one of the things inside of your teachings that really is impactful, and it's learning to be able to really strengthen your masculine core, which brings out a number of leadership qualities that can affect multiple different areas in your life, whether it be in your relationship, whether it be in business, whether it be your, relating with other people inside of your life. And so being able to have that clarity and have that masculine groundedness and that leadership, inside of your life has such a profound effect across so many different verticals in your life. And for you, the teachings and the things that you've done, there are very few people over the course of a lifetime, and I've been very blessed to network with some really great individuals over my life, but there's only a handful of guys that really, personally made an impact on me in the teachings and the things that I learned, underneath them. And so, and you're one of those guys, because I can't tell you the power of some of these things that I've implemented in my own personal life, especially the embodiment practices and what that's done, for me personally.
Yeah.
It's really kind of moved the needle. And then second to that is inside a relationship. I mean, I've been through a number of different relationships. I've been divorced twice. I've blown up marriages and everything else. And I've had to rebuild every time from that. But I learned something from those relationships. And then when you stack the things that we've learned inside of the masculine blueprint, when you stack those into the life experiences, I mean, my relationship now and my marriage now is stronger than, any relationship I've ever been in, by hands down.
Mhm.
And it's a direct result of doing that. So
Yeah. You're a guy that's been there and back. Just say.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and life always seems so hard and complicated for most people, but everything you just said reminded me about the power of embodiment in the sense that it's actually a lot simpler than we make it out to be. You go to leadership courses and you study all this stuff to be better at relationship and in your business and in all these facets of life. And what we realize is that all of that gets a lot easier when you ground your nervous system, because you start to live out of choice rather than just kind of scripting or habituation or reactivity. When you ground your nervous system, you start to live moment to moment the way you choose, the way you want, who you want to be, and how you want to be in this world. And so I say, if you're struggling in any facet of life, it's probably going to be of great benefit to you to enter into this world of embodiment practice and certainly men's work. Ground your nervous system, and then everything will get a little bit easier.
Yeah, for sure. And when I started down this journey for myself personally, I had understood and had a base level knowledge of meditation. That's kind of where it started, and having some mental
Mhm.
clarity with that. And when I really first started looking, I looked at myself. I'm a pretty hardened guy. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I've got combat experience and everything else. And so I handle stress in my life really well. I've been in the corporate space, a lot of life experience. And so I generally found myself as a person that handled stress relatively well. And so when I started looking at the embodiment practice in conjunction with some of the masculine blueprint stuff, I was a little skeptical at first. I'm like, all right, like this is maybe for guys that are maybe a little bit weaker,
Yeah,
in their
yeah.
personality. But I'll tell you, as soon as I started down that path and I started really becoming a student in that space, it really started unlocking potential and power that I had no idea that I was even lacking. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 A lot of us learn. I mean, you and I share this. We're both veterans, and I played sports all my life. I've been a physical person. Um, but we don't realize that a lot of the ways that we learn to cope over the years are to contain, to kind of press it down, push it away. And that's the thing about embodiment is we're not trying to hold back or clench or push anything down. We're actually building our capacity to sit with whatever is there and just let it be as it is. And we can sit with it. And
Yep.
that's kind of the beauty of embodiment. Even as somebody like you who's been through so much and had so much training over the years can benefit from what we're talking about here, these embodiment practices.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you talk about suppressing and holding things in, and that's really, where I hit a turning point. I had 40 years of stuff that I just stuffed. You know what I mean? Stuffed it in and never really had the capacity to really just be in space and be in the environment and be so connected to whatever situation that I was dealing with, whether I was in a state
Yeah.
of threat or handling, interrelating with people and things like that. Once you build the skill set through embodiment to really be able to ground yourself and stay present in the moment, your ability to respond to situations comes from such a different place. And the interesting thing about it is the cascading effect that it has to the entire room, right? Whether it's just a room with your partner or you're in a boardroom or whatever, that energy that you give off and that centering and that groundedness, it literally will take over an entire room.
People can feel it, an embodied man, a grounded man, a primal man. There's a lot of different words to describe what we're talking about here. People can feel that from a mile away. And if we're talking about in the realm of masculine, feminine, maybe like dating or marriage, you sure as hell know that your feminine partner can feel it. Like she can just sniff you out like that. So when you're more grounded, that transmits to her nervous system. That tells her, hey, he's got this, and I can relax a little bit. And then when the feminine relaxes, then they become more open to us, which is what all of us guys want. We want the feminine in their soft space, in their feminine energy, open to us. And you can actually evoke that in your partner simply by becoming this grounded person that you and I are describing.
Yeah, and it has such a profound effect because like you talked about with the masculine and feminine energy, you can really with your own energy, you can shift that within your partner in one direction or the other, right?
Yeah.
Positively or
Right.
negatively. You know what I mean? I talked about it on a couple of earlier podcasts with having that ability to help create a space and create an environment where your person or your partner can really move back into that relaxed feminine state. And for guys, that it's such an intoxicating space to be in with your partner, right? That it's just that's the goal. And that's where when you have those moments when you're with your partner where everything is vibing and you're super connected and everything feels
Yeah.
very, very emotionally close, those are the times where they're
Yeah.
relaxed and you've done things in that space to help create an environment for them to be able to then move into.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And then let's talk about the flip side. Embodiment helps you in your business life as well. I mean, one of the things I always say is that you can't crush it at work if your situation at home is a little off. And so everything we just talked about in the interpersonal space then frees you up to go out into the business world and crush it. And that's one. Two is the way that other people experience you and your leadership is very different when you've done the embodiment work. It becomes more of a primal leadership rather than like, oh, I went to a seminar or a workshop and learned leadership skills. Like those are two very different things. People want to feel your authenticity. They want to feel your depth. They want to feel your humility. And all of that comes through when you start to ground your nervous system. So having that what I often refer to as an embodied executive presence is so powerful to your business success. And that's where I get a lot of people from Silicon Valley coming to me because that's where I live, and coming to me and wanting to work on that so they can use it in their business life and in their home life.
Yeah, and you've got experience in that space as well. I mean, you lived that executive lifestyle, as did I
Yeah.
for a number of years. And so,
Yeah.
we understand the role that takes and the burdens that come along with that. And then being able to implement, tools like this really kind of change the dynamic of how you function in that space. And so when you talk about masculinity, you talk about masculine leadership, it's really wildly misunderstood, and it's become really a controversial topic in this point in society. And there's a very common misconception of what masculinity looks like, right?
Yeah.
And what people perceive that to be versus the masculinity that you and I are talking about.
Yeah, it's so much of our life these days that you get a few bad apples that are kind of out on the extreme, and then everybody else will say, "Well, see, that's what I'm talking about." And they start to perceive the extreme as what other people want the norm to be, which is silly. So, you get like the Andrew Tates of the world, who, he's pretty bombastic and he says some pretty edgy stuff. Well, that's really not what we're talking about here. And when I set out to create the masculine blueprint from my book, what I wanted was two things. One, it was actionable and easy to understand, and guys could apply it. So it had to be applicable, and it had to exist in our modern world. That a fact of life of our modern world is we've got Me Too, and it's changed how we see things. It's changed what's tolerable and what's considered right and proper to do. So it's got to fit into that modern world, because I wanted this to really be something that every guy could apply, no matter what their own personal characteristics were, no matter what their situation was. Every man could apply this, so it was both applicable and fit in the modern world. And I think I've created that. The blueprint has three parts, which I think we should go through maybe
Yeah,
here in a
absolutely. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
But let me speak about it first. The framework has three parts, and when a man goes and does the work to embody all three of these parts, what happens is just the sum total bubbles up in his way of being as what feels like masculine energy, and in fact is my definition of a modern masculine. And so that was super important to me to do something that could be successful in the mainstream in today's world and be absolutely applicable and understandable by any guy.
Yeah. And that masculine energy, it really, like you said, it comes from a place of, it doesn't come from a place of, that typical perception of alpha or very aggressive, type behavior. It really comes from a place of being very, very centered and very thoughtful and very engaged in response and very connected, with people that you are interrelating with, especially,
Yeah.
in business and in
Yeah.
your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be clear. This is not about taking masculinity and watering it down for the modern world. That's not what we're talking about.
Yep.
For me, what I wanted to do was I wanted to really look at the essence of what somebody who is considered masculine feeling in this world in a responsible way. What are the actual building block qualities that this person is exhibiting? That thought was a better way, rather than the memes or archetypes or anything that people write about masculinity. It's like, no, what is that person actually embodying? And so actually, let's go over it. Let's jump
Yeah.
into the masculine blueprint. So
Yeah.
there's three.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's three elements, and the first is respond versus react. So when you think of somebody who's masculine, you're not thinking of somebody who's very reactive and gets super defensive and tries to explain when somebody questions him. In your mind's eye of somebody who exhibits masculine groundedness, that's not what it would be. What this is a quality of man. He's got a groundedness to him. There's a certain stillness in his way of being, and he's very present. He's very much here now and able to be with the moment as it unfolds and with whatever's happening right now. And he's not living in the past and kind of thinking of all the 14 times that he was hurt and then projecting that onto this moment in time. Um, so it's those qualities that create this respond versus react element that is the first element of the blueprint. The second element is provide structure. And so this is the quality of a man who, first and foremost, he's got inner clarity about what he thinks is appropriate for the moment. And first, that folds in what his boundaries, needs, and preferences. But because he's still relational, he's also attuned to the other people that are involved. And whether this is his girlfriend or wife, or maybe this is in his working world, then these are the people that work for him. He's attuned to them. He knows their needs, their wants, their boundaries. And so he's able to fold that into what he thinks is the right thing to do and what works for him. And from that inner clarity, then it gets expressed externally as structure, which is kind of the how we're going to do things, or direction, which is the what we're going to do. And this does not mean that he makes all the decisions and tells everybody else what to do. It's rather he takes responsibility for the ball moving forward, for that there's some structure that's happening so that all the different parts and people that are involved are all working in unison. So he's making sure that decisions get made. He's making sure that the ball gets moved forward, even if he's not the one even making all of the decisions. I like to speak of it. This is a guy that's got directional energy. Just his energy is a bias to action. It's a bias towards focusing the beam and moving forward. And so that's the second element, which is provide structure.
Yeah, and it's funny because in that space there, like it comes from a place with when you're talking about that leadership and providing that direction. It comes from a place that is not dictated, right? You're not dictating the path, and you're not dictating where to go. What you're essentially doing is you're creating an environment and you're creating space where people will just naturally follow that.
Yeah, I would think of it as a slider, and it could be so much so that he slides it down the dictatorial slider, so to speak, um, where it's very, very inclusive. In fact, maybe he's going out of his way to not dominate, and so he might be expressing, here's what I would like, and so he can be on that end of the spectrum. But he does also need times where he just says, "All right, everybody, come here.
Yep.
This is where we're going." And so imagine if there were physical danger, you want him to have that capability to jack that slider up and be like, "All right, now."
Yep.
And it could be in disciplining children, it could be in lots of situations, but so you want him to have that slider, and you want him to bias towards more inclusive until he
Until you,
doesn't,
yep,
until it's time not to be. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's I'm glad that you brought that up. That's an important point. Yeah. Okay, you want to hit the third element?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so the third element is create safety. And, men out there, I can't tell you how important it is relative to the level of trust she feels for you and safety she feels around you. And how much that guides how open her heart is and how open her body is to you. Of course, absent other factors, but their sexual openness often follows their heart openness, and then vice versa. There's sexual closure often follows heart closure. And you have so much impact on how much trust and safety she feels. And I think people get trust pretty well. You've got to follow through on your word. You say it, you're gonna do it. Obviously, integrity is a big part of this. I think that I don't even need to say that. Um, and I think that's a piece guys know. Like, I need to be reliable. I think guys underestimate the impact. Like, even just the simplest example of forgetting. She asked you to get the milk on the way home, and you forget. You're like, it's no big deal, babe. I'll just go back out and get it. But for her, it touches on, a whole host of other things, including how important she is to you.
Mhm.
You forgetting the milk to her can be translated as that she's not important to you. And then that really hurts her in the heart space, and it's going to close her heart. So, trust, I think guys get it mentally, but they really don't always understand the depth to which a breach of trust can really lodge in her psyche and close her. And then there's safety, and I write a little bit about physical, financial, and emotional safety in the book. I mostly talk about emotional safety though, and if she consistently feels that you're invalidating her needs and her opinions and her feelings, and trying to convince her not to feel the way she feels, like, baby, this is not a big deal, like, relax. Um, that can occur to her as again, feeling she doesn't matter, her needs don't matter. And over time, if you're a guy that shuts down your woman's emotions chronically, she is going to close to you, and she in a lot of cases, she's not going to stick around for something like that, because that really hardens the feminine's heart when there's this consistency of it. And I see this so many times with my clients, where there's just a years long pattern of him. He's not trying to. He thinks he's being so rational, but the net effect is that he's telling her, you shouldn't feel the way you feel. Stop feeling the way you feel. And over time, a woman's when there's no space for her emotions, she shuts down to you, and then you get all kinds of relationship problems. So men, like your ability to create emotional safety in her is again so important to how open she is to you both physically and emotionally, and it really dictates the entire tone of the relationship.
Yeah, and it takes work. It's something I talked about on the first podcast of this series, talking about relationships because it's broken into, fitness and nutrition and your mindset and embodiment, and then it's relationship, and then it dives down into business and production and things like that. But for the relationship side, that was kind of the theme of the first podcast was, guys, you have to understand that this is relationship. It's work. It is daily work, and it's skill sets that you have to cultivate. You have to take the time and
Yeah,
put them into your routine, just like you
yeah,
cultivate your body at the gym. You have to cultivate this skill set inside of your relationships, and it needs to be daily, like you said, with consistency.
yeah,
And it takes work, and it takes very, very conscious work on an everyday basis to do that. And what I tell guys all the time is, you have to have an understanding of that's what you were signing up for when you're
yeah,
signing up for a relationship. And if that's not the path that you're
yeah,
on, the path that don't want to choose, don't sign up to be in a fucking relationship
yeah,
at the end of the
yeah.
day.
Yeah, you hit it on the head, and I think this is what a lot of the men's work out there misses, is that there's a lot of alpha stuff out there, and that's great if you're single. But if you're in a relationship with a woman that's got any sort of backbone to her, which is going to be most women these days, you got to have relational skills, and you don't learn that in alpha dog training, I'll tell you that. And so I talk a lot about relational masculinity, and it's that combination that I'm really trying to teach. It's like, how can you be a man that is grounded in himself, will stand up for what he believes, knows what he wants, knows what the world needs, that can help create that in the world, and a man that is more relational with his woman, so he understands the feminine. And a lot of guys try to write that off. They're like, oh, it's just a bunch of namby-pamby bullshit. Well, okay, good luck in your relationship
Yeah.
if you really want to have a substantial woman in your life. And I don't know, I see it all the time. And in fact, if I think of like the alpha dog men that are in my universe, I'm thinking about one in particular who's probably one of the most alpha guys I know, and his relationship is just an on and off again disaster,
Yeah,
because he's with a strong woman and he
sure.
just hasn't learned those relational skills yet. So it's that fusion of the masculine with the relational, which makes an unbeatable and very, very unique combination in this world within a man.
Yeah. And when you have that, you know, behind you and you have dialed that in and you start unlocking the power of how strong you can make your relationship,
Yeah,
that's one of those categories that's just going to help you be more efficient in the different things that you're doing. Because if you have that locked down at home and it is a very positive environment and it's a very fulfilling environment, that just it boosts you in every other aspect that you have, and vice versa when it goes the other way and you have turmoil and you have conflict and you have the
yep,
constant turbulence at home, it knocks you off of everything else that you have going on.
yeah, yeah. It's true. It's You're gonna have to edit this out because I forgot what I was gonna
Oh
say.
yeah, yeah, you're good. That's what the beauty of editing.
But you use the word efficient. I was thinking, man, it's about effectiveness. Like, you're going to be in a longer, better relationship with a higher quality woman when you internalize these skills.
Yeah,
And I can say this: the woman I'm with, we've been together for 12 years. I'm in a successful relationship, and she's a spitfire, man. Like, she got a strong masculine from her dad and a strong feminine from her woman. I mean, from her mom. And it's a handful,
yeah,
and it's these skills that keep me in relationship with a fiery woman who just delights me every day and dazzles me. She's amazing.
yep.
um but you got to have these skills if you want to be with a high quality woman.
Right. And you have to know how to, when you're with a high quality woman like that, and a woman, especially nowadays, because the women in society has shifted. And so now they are in a lot of roles and positions of power. And so a lot of their day, when you talk about masculine and feminine energy, it's not always particularly male and female. There's a lot of times where, women now, because of their positions in society, they have to spend a lot of their time and a lot of their day in that masculine space and in that leadership
Yeah,
and very rational space. And sometimes it takes quite a bit of effort on your part to create the environment to allow them to come off of that and settle
Yeah.
back in so that you
Yeah.
can have that polarity inside of your relationship. I mean, I deal with the same thing. I have a very, very strong, very independent wife, who's same thing, delights me every single day. Like I'm just blown away by her every single day. She's a therapist of 25 years and a relationship therapist is her forte. So I'm already working from a disadvantaged state. But when I look at her and
Yeah.
she has to do during the course of a day, she has to spend a lot of the time in that masculine space because she's guiding other people, and
Yeah.
it ebbs and flows for her throughout the course of the day. But there's definitely a distinct process that has to occur to allow for that settling to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. And the point that one of the points you're making there is a man, somebody who wants to be in their masculine energy can evoke his strong woman into her feminine energy by your own way of being. I mean, in intimacy, we naturally polarize. So if one person comes in, with the penetrative masculine energy, often the other person will yield and become more receptive, not always.
Yeah.
Um, but when you're both kind of in that masculine energy and you're a little scared to really bring yours, she's just going to stay in hers. And in some ways you have to out masculine your masculine partner. Like I have lots of clients and they're like, she's just 3 steps ahead of me all the time. And I was like, bro, there's no getting away from this. You're going to have to bring more direction and structure than her. Otherwise, she's never going to let it go. And that's more on the extreme side, but I think some version of that applies for all men. You can evoke it. And if you don't want her in her masculine, you've got to evoke her into her feminine at times,
Yeah.
at times.
Sure, sure. And guys that have really kind of lost sight of that inside of their relationship, they have extra work to do because they've created a space by not having
Yeah.
that leadership. They've
Yeah.
dug themselves a hole that now they have to build all of that back. And that's where a lot of guys will struggle is they'll start to implement these things that they either see online or that they read about or whatever. And because they're not getting an instant response, they just chalk it up to it not working. And they're not realizing how big of a deficit and what they've created over the course of their marriage or
Yeah.
their relationship and how big of a hole they've dug that they have to
Yeah.
change the narrative on.
Yeah. And then I would add on to that and just say, and because their woman stays in her masculine and kind of has the lead, he gets more and more reticent to really assert himself. And so it's not only is he digging out of a hole, but he's got his own reluctance to deal with as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And the polarity in the relationship is so, so critical. I mean, it's just one of those things that you have to have that polarity in order to feel each other, in order to be,
Yeah.
emotionally connected in that
Yeah.
particular space.
Yeah. And there's something from the book I want to share here based on what kind of where we are in the conversation.
Yeah,
We talked about the 3 elements, and there's different archetypes of men. And I think different ones map to different elements in the blueprint. And so, there's respond versus react. It's about that quality of groundedness and stillness, like we talked about. Some guys will take that to the stoic extreme. And you've,
mhm,
you've probably talked to a lot of guys about stoicism, and so they clench down so hard that they're really way over indexed on respond versus react. Then you've got provide structure. And this is where the alpha dog kind of comes in and maybe over indexes a little bit, or maybe not a little bit, maybe a lot bit too much, because he's like, I'm providing fucking structure for everybody now, and we're going
yeah,
to do it my way, and whether he says that or just acts like that, it's the same thing.
yeah,
So he's over indexing on provide structure. The new age kind of nice guy is over indexing on great safety, and he's trying to do whatever it takes to make everybody feel okay and feel safe, and there's no tension, there's no conflict. So he over indexes on create safety. So if you try to really only implement one of these, you're gonna become one of these archetypes, which is almost a caricature in some ways, because they're not a complete man.
right.
um, that's where all 3 of the elements are important. When you implement all 3, you have more of a holistic masculinity, which takes the form of what I talked about, relational masculinity. So that I wanted to share that in terms of the archetypes as they map to different elements in the blueprint.
Yeah, and it's so important to have. I talk about balance across the additional facets of life with like your fitness and your nutrition and your mindfulness and your spirituality and
Mhm.
your relationships and having balance across all of those because you can be really, really good in one of those containers. But if you have pulled energy out of the other containers and you have no balance in that,
Yeah.
you're going to run into the same effect. So it's so critical to make sure you're giving those equal balanced attention, and being able to provide that inside of your space.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, just it's holism, it's balance. You've got to really, it's not just this one thing. And I think that's in our society, we all get fixated on one thing, but it's not whole. It's just like the food we eat. There's these distillations of nutrients that when you distill them out, they sort of lose their effectiveness because they're not part of a whole.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very similar metaphor to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and as guys develop these different skills, I mean, the power that really unlocks, if you get your nutrition and your fitness in order and you're in relatively decent shape and you're able to carry yourself as such without even saying anything,
Hmm.
it makes a difference, right? When you walk in and you have this strong relationship with your partner without even saying anything, it gives off an effect. It's been such a weird experience for me personally to see, like inside of my own relationship, when we're firing on all cylinders, how that radiates to everyone else around us. We walk into a room with other couples or we go into an event with other couples, and like our light is just radiating across the board, and there is a clear difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's because you've mastered some of those skills of being masculine and relational. And it's
Sometimes don't think for a second that I still don't screw it up, because
Nah, I got
we're,
you,
we're
man.
all
Yeah.
still students, man.
Yeah, you and I both.
Yeah,
But the amount of work that you've put in, the amount of capability that you've been able to bring to bear to your life and relationship is rare. And so the reason I say that is men out there, there's so much you can aspire to, and it's all within your reach.
yep,
It's all within your reach. Just live the blueprint and you will see a lot of your relationship problems either abate or go away. And
yeah.
that's a consistent message I have to guys. Like, that thing you think you're fighting about, it's actually rooted in a lack of your masculine leadership. And when you start to bring that other thing starts to go
Yeah.
away.
And a common thing too, I see it in my circles all the time. I'm sure you do, between coaching and in your own personal circles. Like I sit back a lot of times and I just observe. I'll observe a room and I'll observe interaction and I'll listen to guys talk, and they're complaining about their partner and everything else. And I'm just sitting there like, guys, you understand all of these things that you're complaining about are a direct result of things that you are doing inside
Yeah.
of the relationship, but yet you are finding a way to put that onto your partner because you can't rationalize it in your own brain that it's coming from you, and the lack of work that you're doing on yourself.
Yeah. 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 I have this quote from the book that I like to use, and it says, "You may or may not be the problem or the solution." And so I know you believe in this ethos. Um, you really gotta, it's like, I'm gonna put this load on my back and I'm gonna carry us forward. And what that means is, um, you don't worry about how we got here, who said
Right.
the wrong thing, whose fault it is. You say, no, I'm going to actually solve this. And you're going to lead the two of you out of whatever kink in the connection there is. And so if you have a little kind of a tiff at dinner and then in the ride home, it's like cold shoulder. No, you don't tolerate that. And I don't mean tolerate that in her. You don't tolerate that from the two of you. And you say, you know what, babe, we're going into that space where we're not connected. And I don't want us to do that anymore.
Yeah. And a lot of times what ends up happening is guys will take that energy and they'll get frustrated by it. And then it's like dumping gasoline on the fire, and they just make the situation 10 times worse. They would have been better off not even saying anything at all. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's why we want them to learn these skills, because
yeah,
more is possible.
it really is. And there's so much more that you can tap out of your relationship. And when you do that, the amount of fuel that it gives you in your own personal space is very profound. I mean, it becomes a driver, inside of everything else that you do.
Yeah. Life becomes more fulfilling.
Yep,
You know, this is what I said earlier. You cannot crush it in business if your relationship is all messed up at home.
without a doubt.
When you are thriving at home, man, you start thriving at work. And so I encourage anybody in the business world to do this work.
Yeah.
It is powerful.
Yep. And I've told guys, I tell guys all the time, I'm like, listen, and even guys that I coach, I go, yeah, this is content that you really want to take some time and understand. I said, I've
Yeah.
lived it and implemented it, but I still have 4 years of notes in the book in my nightstand, and I still refer back to it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? As I come across different situations or when I evaluate myself and say, okay, here's what happened inside of our marriage or inside of this particular relationship. how how could that have been handled better, and how did I misapply some of the tools to that so that I can learn from that and do it better next time that a circumstance like that comes around?
Yeah.
Because I think where we really have the hardest time operating is when what you refer to as a state of threat. Whenever you're in a state of threat or you're in something that is very, not just stressful, but anxiety provoking. Maybe it's hitting a trigger point from something that you haven't dealt with, from past or from childhood or something along that. But it strikes a chord with you, and it puts you into this state of threat. And we as men, without the right tool set that we've cultivated, we don't function very well in that space.
So true. I don't know how to even respond to that, Jason. It's so true, man.
So let's do this. So guys, again, the relationships are so important. Your relationship at home, I know we've touched on it a number of times, and we'll keep going into detail and giving you guys some tips and skills to do that. But one of the ways you can expand that, and if it's something you're really struggling with at home, get the book. Start there. If you find that it resonates with you, there's coaching classes available directly through GS. GS and I are going to be collaborating on doing some boot camp stuff later in the year. So that's going to be something really cool that I'm looking forward to. But make that investment because you chose to be in a relationship with your partner. You have an obligation to fulfill that role inside of your relationship. And if you don't, that's on you. And if your relationship is shit because of it, that's on you. Right. So let's shift gears for a second and talk a little bit more in detail about embodiment practice, because I think it's another area that's wildly misunderstood in the
Yeah.
space because everybody, either doesn't understand it or they want to correlate it directly to meditation. So if we can, I know we're coming up to the end of our time here, but just quickly, if you could just kind of give the guys a some insight into what embodiment practice actually is.
Yeah. Most of us rest in our thinking minds all day long. And it makes sense. We consume information all day long. We analyze information. So we're getting emails and reports and videos and messages and just it's really nonstop. All of us have our eyes on a screen most of the day and we're analyzing. So of course our analytical brain gets to be very strong. If you work any muscle all day long, it will get strong. And that's what happens to our analytical brain. And unfortunately, our analytical brain tries to come into the relational space of intimacy. And that's where it gets to be a problem because the brain's always trying to make sense of things and assemble a fact pattern so that we can understand what this direct experience of our world really means. And we get analytical. And in the space of intimacy, that doesn't work. And so we're often in our thinking analytical brain that is creating strategies so that we don't have to feel emotional discomfort. It's trying to figure other people out. It's trying to assign blame. It's just trying to figure all of these things out. And unfortunately, that really impairs our ability to just feel what's actually happening inside of us, feel what's happening in our partner, and connect. That all happens at a very different level than all this information flow and analysis that's up here. So all of our awareness kind of rests on our thinking mind, and then we just go from there. Embodiment is at the highest level. It's about taking some of that attention and tearing it away from the thinking mind that has its strategies and its stories and letting it rest on physical sensation in the body, like certain specific physical sensations. And when you do that, an interesting thing happens because physical sensation only happens in the now, whereas thought is about the future and the past. So your thinking mind is always projecting out into the future or ruminating about the past. It's rarely ever right here. It's never right here, right now.
Right.
But sensation is here right now. So when you are have some of your awareness on actual physical sensation, it tethers you into this moment, and you naturally become more present when you're tethered to that sensation in your body, which is in the now. So embodiment practice is really about, how do I train myself to turn some of my attention to into my the physicality of my body. And look, I'll give an overly simplified example. I mean, the simplest embodiment exercise ever is just a straight breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And while you do that, on the in breath, you feel the sensation of air rushing through the nostrils. You actually feel that. And then on the out breath, you feel the sensation of it coming through the throat. So and I'm feeling all that physical sensation that happens there. Then I pause. And now I'm feeling the sensation in here, because all that generates a sensation. If you sit there and do that and just feel for 5 minutes a day, that's going to bring you more into an awareness of your physicality of your body, because you're actually just practicing feeling. And what happens is, when you turn some of your attention towards these sensations, it just crowds out the thought. And so this, Jason, is where I get to the distinction between embodiment and meditation as it's typically taught. Not saying all meditation schools of thought, but as it's typically taught. In meditation, you use your mind to notice thoughts arise, and then you use your mind to say, oh, I'm going to let go of those thoughts and not identify with them. And what you see is, it becomes a little incestuous. It's like the fox guarding the hen house, because it's the same mind that's supposed to police itself to not do the thing it wants to do, which is drift off the thought. Embodiment is different. Instead of trying not to latch onto thoughts and trying not to think them, embodiment just says, oh, you don't try to do any of that. All you do is, when you notice thoughts arise, you just make a choice and you turn your attention back to a physical sensation that you're focused on. And then you'll feel that for a while, and then you'll get lost and you'll drift off into thought, and then you'll catch yourself, and you won't try to make it stop. You'll just say, oh, no, I'm going to turn my attention back. Drift, notice, come back. Drift, notice, come. So you get the pattern there. So that's the difference between embodiment and meditation. And I'll say this, I know I monologued for a while here.
Sure.
The net result is, you're going to push out a lot of that ruminating thought and kind of the weird behaviors that it causes us to exhibit. And you're just going to be more resting in the here and now, available to observe and be with whatever's arising in the moment.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much power in that. I use it daily in multiple instances throughout the day. I have small little techniques that I've cultivated over time that I can do very, very quickly. And it's the same thing when you find yourself moving off center, and you find yourself drifting off center because of certain things that you're dealing with through the day, you have to have some tools in place that you can very quickly realign and bring yourself back to that grounded space. So yeah, it's awesome, man. Well, I hope that in the future we'll be able to dive into some of these topics deeper. Like I said, GS has got courses available. There's a whole library. Guys that are clients of mine, they have access to the library. We set them up with an account so that they can go through and learn some of the embodiment practices, and we talk about it. And then there's also some of the boot camps that are ran, some of the men's retreats. We're going to be doing some collaborative boot camps together and everything else. So I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, me too, Jason.
All right, Jess, man, thank you again for jumping on the call. And like I said, in the future, I look forward to maybe taking a deep dive in some of these other topics and practices.
Yeah, me as well. I look forward to that.
All right, take care.